My baseball days are long behind me, but UConn did what I did in my last ever game. 4 for 4. You're Locked On UConn.
You are Locked On UConn, your daily podcast on the UConn Huskies, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thanks for making Locked On UConn your first listen every day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcasts and on YouTube as part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Before we get into the show, a couple of quick notes. The support on YouTube has been amazing. I'd love to see all of my subscribers also downloading the audio version wherever you get your podcasts. It's a huge help to make the Locked On UConn audience grow. So if you can do me two quick favors. First, click that subscribe button at the bottom of your screen. Then head over to Apple, Spotify, wherever you get your podcast. Hit that follow button. This way, you'll never miss a moment of Locked On UConn and help us continue to grow the content you love. Your support means everything to me. And if you're listening on any audio device, transistor radio, whatever, please take a moment to drop us a 5-star review. And a special shout out to my everydayers. This is dedicated to you. We've launched our Insider program. Find it on our community page and my social media. Get a 14-day free trial of Subtext for exclusive UConn basketball insights, behind-the-scenes content, direct access to me, special Q&A sessions, giveaways, and more. Remember, subscribing to the podcast on YouTube or an audio device increases its value. With that, 10% of all earnings from Locked On UConn will go back to UConn in Bleeding Blue for good. We're working out the details, but it's pretty simple. Supporting the podcast helps get great players and gives the coaches what they need to succeed. So a great place to start is if you are a subscriber, is signing up for the Insider program. Get your 14-day free trial. What do you have to lose? Check it out. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. As the playoffs wind down, they're actually over, the sports stop sporting like we want them to. But this summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or a bonus daily. That's right. There's something for everyone. Every day, all summer long, visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. So let's get into the program. UConn went a dynamic 4 for 4 after yesterday's second round. I, for one, am super excited obviously, for Donovan Clingan going to the Portland Trailblazers. We'll be working with Mike Richmond at Locked On Blazers to bring you some content there about what they loved about Donovan. So I'll have that for you in the coming days. I'm excited to see what they do with him from a scheme perspective, what they're expecting, what we think he can be as a plus shooter. He's obviously a very good anchor for the defensive side of the ball, and feel really great about him developing into that dominant force that anchored UConn's defense, but also their offense when it was necessary, when it was needed. I think some of the underrated stuff that Donovan does is around the top of the key and probably stretched out further once he gets to the next level is kind of the dribble handoffs, using his body for screens, all of the intricacies that an offense that UConn runs. I think he's going to find that he is more than ready for what the NBA throws him from that perspective, from a mental perspective. And I'm curious to see if he puts on any weight. Like he's a big kid to begin with. I think he's 280 pounds, 7'1" 4/4" or whatever, standing flat-footed. But with those shoes on, as I like to say, you really should get your real height when you're wearing basketball shoes, because that's what you play with on the court. So he's 7'2" plus on the court, 7'10" wingspan. The kid's going to be a great basketball player in a great basketball town. Portland is known to really show love for their players. Then you have Stephon Castle, also going to an incredible basketball town, also the site of a Final Four. If you look back at my background, I believe the 2004 banner that you can see that's not blocked by my shelf there was also in San Antonio. So we may be seeing a double dip there when we go back to the Final Four this year. Knock on wood that UConn gets there and goes for that three-peat. But back to Stephon, going to an incredible basketball city in the San Antonio area, San Antonio Spurs. What a blessing for him. He goes from high school to Dan Hurley, who will be a Hall of Fame coach. Then he has an incredible season. Big East Freshman of the Year. probably was the anchor of that team, bailed us out on multiple occasions when we needed his scoring. Lockdown defender after defender, or lockdown player after player in the NCAA tournament. Boo Buie, Terrence Shannon, Mark Sears, you name it, he did it. I think he had, how many points did he have in the final? I think I might have had 20 points in the final game. Was essentially a jack of all trades. And now he gets to go to the pros and get coached by Popovich, who's a Hall of Fame coach, who's coached USA basketball. I think it doesn't get much better than that. And I'm sure he believes that he's blessed and excited about his prospects to also be playing with the Rookie of the Year last year in Victor Wembanyama. Love that for him. And then we go into yesterday's second round. My two predictions were, I was right on, if we go back to my first initial thought, I was wrong on Donovan. I thought he was going to go 1. He dropped to 7. I said San Antonio would get Steph at 4. So I was right there. Started to hear things on the day of the draft that Steph may go as high as 1. So we did a show on it. So I was wrong there. But initially, the Steph move to San Antonio made a lot of sense. So there it was. And then I started to think about teams that would make sense for our second rounders, with Tristan and Cam. And it really had to be a team that saw the type of players that they are, that valued winning, that valued players that are older, that are more established, that they don't have to handhold, that they don't have to worry about anything. And so I called Tristan at 49 to the Indiana Pacers. So here he is, drafted by the Pacers. That's a fun offense. I know if you're a Knicks fan, you probably hate them, and that's fine. But the beauty of not having a favorite NBA team is now I can follow all these guys with absolutely no shame that I'm going against them. Because could you imagine? I can think of a few Knicks fans who are UConn, like lovers of UConn, either went there or just are Connecticut folks, and now Indiana's like their sworn enemy in the Eastern Conference. It had been for years, right? Rekindled that rivalry. What if Tristan Newton is one of the reasons why Indiana gets over the top? Because I don't think you can look at Tristan Newton and say, what would you need to be looking for that to be not a player that is going to have a long NBA career? He has positional size, can play anywhere you want, on the ball, off the ball. He was a disruptor on defense. Probably lacks in a little bit of lateral quickness, but I think he makes up for it with his size in anticipation. Averaged 17, 6 and 6 in college. I think if you're looking for one thing for him to do better is shoot the three a little bit better. He was just over 30% this year. But we all know as UConn fans, when they needed him, like in the 2 games they probably played, I wouldn't say the worst. They didn't probably play terrible at Kansas. They just didn't all come together, and they still barely lost. What do you have, 30? And then in a game against Nova that was tighter than it probably should have been, 25 there. 20 points in the national title game. Actually had 20 points, 5 rebounds, and 7 assists. Had 12 points and 9 assists and 3 rebounds against Alabama in the Final Four. Tristan is going to be a very good player for a long time in the NBA. So apologies to Knick fans that he may be doing very clutch things. Like even the terrible game that we played last year against Creighton, I believe he had 20, 25 plus, 27. So, yeah, I mean, Tristan's going to be great, and I think he makes that team, and I just don't see how they could potentially cut him there. I think even if he's on a 2-way contract, he'll be on that roster. Cam's is a little more dicey, in my opinion. I am so happy for Cam that he got drafted. I think he went 53 or 51 to Memphis. I'm not familiar with Memphis's roster. I'll be completely honest. They were awful this year. But they do have. I feel like even a couple years back when they had a better team with John Morant, Desmond Bane, Jaren Johnson, those guys, that team needed a lot of growing up. So maybe Cam comes in, because I made a statement that whoever drafts Cam, it's going to be one of the best decisions they ever make as a GM, because this kid is going to bring all kinds of professionalism. He's going to get in these guys' faces and be like, listen, I'm probably older. He's probably older than half the team. when you look at some of these guys that are on Memphis. I mean, he's probably older than John Morant, right? I'm not saying he's going to go in and teach these guys a thing or two, but he may have to. You know what I mean? Like just really try to focus on the culture aspect of things, but also the kid's a baller. He's a good ball handler. He can run your offense in a pinch. He is disruptive on defense from a deflection standpoint. I think he can definitely play a TJ McConnell role and come in, or a Peyton Pritchard role, maybe be a half court specialist like Peyton Pritchard was in as long as they let him travel. Listen, this kid is a 45% 3-point shooter. Is he going to be perfect? No, but I think he definitely will come in and play 10, 12 minutes a game. If he makes the team and he's allowed to grow, I think this kid can have a long career as a specialist and continue to ascend as an NBA player. Well, absolutely phenomenal couple of days for UConn. I have to say I was disappointed, obviously, in ESPN's coverage of when Tristan and Cam were both selected. But, ESPN is a lot different than it was when, I'm going to sound real old, than when I was growing up. And that's unfortunate. But we're going to talk about who's next from this now NBA factory that is the UConn Huskies, coming up after this. Passion, drive, and patience. The formula for winning championships is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. Superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time, or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to make your car the MVP. Bring home huge wins and keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only, exclusions apply. eBay Motors, Guaranteed Fit, only available to U.S. customers. Did you know that the same things that fuel the best athletes in the world can still help the rest of us? Just ask recently NBA drafted pick Cam Spencer, who does every little thing he can to dial in his wellness, reduce inflammation in his body, and make sure he's eating foods that fuel him. And he does that with the help of one of Connecticut's best wellness brands. Here's what he has to say about it. I chose to partner with the Feel Good Lab because I wanted to elevate my performance, improve my health, and become more educated on my nutrition. Since we started working together, all of those goals have been reached. Now I'm continuing to find new ways to get better with the Feel Good team, and I'm so super grateful for our partnership. In fact, that is exactly why I wanted to partner with Ryan in the Feel Good Lab. Plant-based pain relief and recovery tools, the highest quality supplements, and an at-home diagnostic test that measures what foods in my body trigger inflammation. Plus, they're an official partner of UConn basketball. As you guys know, I'm in my 4th week of my wellness journey, and so far I feel fantastic. So use the code CAMSPENCER for 12% off your order and a 10% donation to Bleeding Blue for Good. Okay, guys, we are back to the show. Definitely check out the Feel Good Lab. Ryan Gresh and the folks over there do fantastic stuff. I got a bunch of creams. I have plantar fasciitis that I'm using on the back of my heel, amongst other things. But definitely go check out and use that promo code Cam Spencer for 12% off. And then obviously you get a 10% donation of that order goes to Bleeding Blue for Good. So we definitely have that in common. We're trying to support UConn men's and women's basketball with our endeavors, and so I'm thankful to partner with Ryan going forward. So I got to think about this UConn NBA factory that we're starting to pump out, and get used to it, guys. This is not going to stop. We're going to be sending 3-4 players to the pros almost every year, and maybe in a down year it's only one, but think about the roster. We have, a kid coming in that was a McDonald's All-American, very similar to Steph Castle, different style player, but Liam McNeely is 100% going to be a lottery pick. I'd be shocked if he plays more than 1 year at UConn. The kid is already projected as a top 10 pick. I think I saw him, the highest I saw him in an NBA mock draft right now is 14. But of course, there are always cautionary tales, right? A kid like Justin Edwards was the projected number 1 overall pick. Isaiah Collier, I think he was either the last pick of the first round or somewhere in that range. He was also a projected lottery pick, and he got hurt, and all that. Anything is possible. So I don't wish anything poorly on Liam, obviously, but I think what he's getting from UConn and being set up with the coaching he's getting, the exposure, being around players that are either on the same path as him, Alex Caravan, Jalen Stort, Solo Ball, Samson Johnson. I think those are the guys that are aspiring to be pros the following year. Solo may be a stretch, but he's got the tools, good positional size, incredible length and reach, good plus shooter. I think once he gets more run, he'll show even more of that. But I think the guys who are going to be drafted next year are obviously have Liam. I think Jalen Stort, if he starts this year and does everything that we saw in flashes from him, from his defensive ability to some of those like highlight reel blocks, his shooting, his smooth game, that is everything that the pros want. He's got every level type scoring. He can shoot threes. He can pull up from mid-range, even though they don't do that anymore. He's got a good float game. He obviously has the athleticism to go ahead and just dunk on you. 6'8", good length, good defender, rebounder. You name it, the kid's got it. Just has to put it into some film, right? And show what he has. And then I think, obviously, Alex flirted with the pros this year and came back to chase this three-peat. I mean, he goes first round next year, barring some crazy, step back from his play. And I don't see how that happens, right? At this point, he is who he is. And I think he's only going to show a little bit more of that game. I think the game against Texas in the preseason NIT, where I think we had some foul trouble, and I don't remember the exact circumstances, but essentially Alex was the show. And there were a couple of points in the game where it's like, listen, the shot clock was winding down, and that Texas team was a really athletic team. They had a bunch of 5-star kids that weren't great scorers, weren't really good, quote unquote, like playing basketball the way that it's supposed to be played. But they are definitely the type of kids that can give you trouble from an offensive perspective when you're trying to score on them. So defensively, they were tough, physical, and Alex hit some great like fadeaways and some turnaround jump shots, stuff that he really didn't do a lot of because he didn't need to. But when he does need to, i.e. with this team being a little younger, needs to step up, I think he's going to show that in a much more consistent way. And therefore, I think he's either right on the edge of that lottery pick, middle of the first round, really solidifies himself as a first-round pick in next year's draft with this year's play. Some of these tweeners, I don't think people are talking about Samson Johnson enough as a potential NBA player. Think about what the NBA wants. Is Samson Johnson 6'1"? No, but he's 6'10", like a legitimate 6'10". Incredible reach, incredible reach, not leech. Incredible reach, phenomenal shot blocker. They're adding, I think I heard Dan Hurley on either Cowherd or somewhere talking about, expecting him to jump up, maybe even 15, 20 pounds this year. That would be huge. If he keeps his quickness and then adds 15, 20 pounds of muscle, he's a legit NBA prospect. And there's no way that he's on this team thinking, well, I'm just a good college player. I'm going to go play overseas. I know that without a doubt, all of these guys have aspirations to play in the best league in the world. That still is the NBA. And so, but I think Samson has an opportunity to be a first or second round pick. Definitely a second rounder if he progresses. And God, if he has a breakout year, maybe looking at another 4 kids getting drafted in next year's draft. And Solo is an iffy one too. If he comes to play this year and really kind of shows what I think we all think he is, then there's definitely going to be some thoughts for him to be a professional basketball player looking to make that leap. And then the last one, which I think is an interesting one, but I think it's more for the following year, is I think people are going to really, really fall in love with Aiden Mahaney. I don't think 1 year at UConn is gonna push him into that NBA prospect stratosphere, but it's certainly to get people on his radar, or definitely get people on Aiden's radar. So I'm looking forward to that. And I think I want people to be cautioned to this idea that we're not going to turn into Kentucky where these guys are going to be one and dones. You may have one or two on your roster because they're just too good of players to pass up, too good of kids, not going to mess up with your chemistry, a la Liam or a la Steph. I mean, how'd that work out? You know, we had a established team, brought in a 5-star recruit, McDonald's All-American, and he kind of solidified it, and we won a national championship back-to-back. Doing the same thing here, the formula seems to be working. So, and hell, I'm sure Terrace Reed Jr. is thinking the same thing. Like, these guys got a Damasnogo to be an NBA player, and I have similar traits as him. Where do I go? Right? So all these guys coming in. Then you look at Ahmad Noel, Isaiah Abraham. 100% our eyes are looking to the NBA. So UConn has become an NBA factory. They are the new NBA factory, and not just the one and done. Just stop in for a cup of coffee and then pick up your NIL check and then sign with guy off the bench is drafted 15th for someone. That's not what UConn is, but it's a different type of NBA factory, and I think that's what stands us apart going forward. So we're going to talk about my thoughts about the draft coverage and pretty much just around the NBA draft and, you know, whether it's UConn guys or not coming up after this. Are you watching Fox Sports or ESPN on your TV all day? Have to turn down the volume with all that shouting? Make the switch to Locked On Sports today, a free 24/7 sports streaming channel programmed for you every day to bring you the biggest stories without all the screaming. Locked On Sports today brings you can't-miss analysis, opinions, and news, streaming 24/7 on YouTube or the free Amazon Fire TV channels app, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I love sports. I love them so much. I never want them to stop. But as the playoffs wind down, and now they're over, we get fewer games, and the sports aren't sporting like I want them to. But FanDuel lets me keep in the sports going whenever I want, and all I have to do is open the app and dream up bets anytime I'm in the mood. For me, this is future bets. As you can see, the 6 national championship banners behind me recently put up. This summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with Boost or Bonus Daily. That's right. There's something for everyone every day, all summer long. So head over to FanDuel.com/lockedon. Start making the most out of your summer. FanDuel, official sports betting partner of Major League Baseball. Go get those future bets in, guys. Plus 900, plus 1,000. UConn's going to three-peat. You heard it here first. Okay, we're back. Last segment of the program of Locked On UConn. Part of Locked On UConn is college basketball. And if I have to veer into other stories, I just want you guys to know that it's typically going to be at the end of the show. So if you're only interested in all things UConn, if we ever do a segment that's funny or, you know, that's not UConn specific, it's more UConn adjacent, then it'll be always in this third segment. So the biggest stories from the NBA draft were the coverage of Bronny was embarrassing. Bronny James went to the Lakers at 55. If you don't truly understand why Dan Hurley turned down, like internally, like he's always, and I think some of you kind of lost your mind on a few people that talked about how they've probably felt like this was more kind of leverage and contrived, and Dan Hurley went out there and it really was, you know, I don't think anyone thinks that Dan Hurley is lying to you. That's the first things first. But coach speak and coaches talking to each other and I don't know all of this myself. Like I can't sit there and say that Dan Hurley is a friend of mine. So I'm not saying that he says this internally. I think Dan Hurley thinks that Bronny is as he talked about him on a podcast, that he would have fit well at UConn. He's a defensive player. He's a good shooter. He understands the game. He's a student of the game. Has been taught by one of the best basketball minds in NBA history. But the idea that if Dan Hurley went to the Lakers before they got JJ Redick to be their head coach, if he had taken that job and then looking at that war room of them calling Bronny to tell him that he was the pick, that if that was basically forced upon Dan Hurley to have to draft Bronny James and not have that kind of autonomy to be like, hey, look, guys, I like Bronny. He's a good kid. LeBron is we're going to sign LeBron for another 2 or 3 years, whatever it is. I'm in for all that. But I can't in good conscience pick Bronny at 55 when there's other players on the board that are going to help us and it not be a business marketing ploy, essentially, is what it is, right? I even shudder to call it history. It is technically history, but I guess a lot of people make history every day by doing things that they've never done before. So this whole idea that a father-son had never played together in the NBA on the same team, first time ever, good for them. My biggest issue is not about nepotism, because there's plenty of nepotism in sports. The Maras, in as a Giants fan, have been passing down the ownership reins for years and probably shouldn't have. Cowboys, the Rockets, all these guys are family-run places. I'm pretty sure people at Amazon and the Bezoses are going to be handing over, the reins to their kids too. So that's really not what it's about. To me, it's more about, can the kid play? And honestly, no one really knows. I mean, if you didn't play much for USC last year, they were pretty much of a disaster. I was interested to see if he was playing, but he never did play. Averaged like 10, 15 minutes a game, a few points, a few shots. He was a 26% 3-point shooter. I think it's just more sad for him. Good for him. He already probably has, millions of dollars in the bank that are his own, because of who he is. And there's nothing wrong with that. I have zero issue with that. My biggest thing is, if you're strictly talking about what this means for basketball, it's not basketball. It's just he got picked so that he can be on this team, and they can say they played together for at least one season. And good for them. And that's all I have to say. I think it's embarrassing that ESPN spent that much time on it. That's all. Simple. The other thing I was going to say is Justin Edwards was a projected number 1 overall pick and at minimum a lottery pick in 2023. He went undrafted. And what that tells me, it's like the Indiana Jones in The Last Crusade and end scene. He chose poorly. When a kid is talented as a senior in high school and you're looking to go somewhere, don't just pick the biggest name. Pick where you feel like you can be molded, where you can, go with a great coaching staff. Right now, that's UConn. And I know that UConn's not the only place where you can get good coaching, but the proof's in the pudding. And when you're hot, you're hot. They had 4 guys being picked in 2 days. I'm going to say that all 4 of these guys are going to be good players in the pros, maybe elite players in the pros. And that's what's going to happen. You got UConn getting guys come in for unofficial visits. Caden Lewis was on an unofficial visit. And we're going to get more and more of these visitors as time goes on. And just to calm you, Adam Zagoria was pretty adamant that Danny and his staff are not going to lose track of their morals of how they got here. Just because everyone is excited to come and visit doesn't mean that we're taking everybody. So that's good news. But the wildest story of the weekend was Kyle Filipowski. Say what you want about Duke and how annoying some of their fans are. But this kid balled out for them for 2 years, probably didn't meet his full potential. And I feel like that has something to do with coaching as well. But how many times do we see a Duke lottery pick slip out of the first round? Surely the Celtics would snag him late, right? But no, he wasn't picked until fittingly by the Utah Jazz with the first pick of the second round. And part of the reason is because of this wild story that he was distracted at meetings, that he was, not himself. He had terrible workouts, and people started doing some digging. And then his brother and mother were on social media talking about how Kyle Filipowski's girlfriend, who used to babysit these Filipowski brothers, is dating Kyle Filipowski. I think she's 28 and he's 20. Forget about the age. The babysitting thing creeps me out. And how she's essentially groomed him to be a Mormon and be whatever religion you want. But I feel like it's pretty wild to me that this story didn't get a lot of play on national media, because that's a wild story. And it reminds me, we hear stories all the time about how, you know, players drop because they have a problem girlfriend, or they have their mother is crazy, or their father is always, you know, asking for this, and this. And, you know, those stories go on. Parents are the worst in youth sports. But I don't think I've ever heard the whole girlfriend is grooming me to be a Mormon and doesn't let me talk to my parents or my brothers. That's a new one on me. I knew that's some that Scientology does that a little bit. I think there's some Mormons, some kind of really Orthodox folks that only mix with their own religious folks, and that's wild to me as well. But that's just crazy. And I hope that kid actually does have a good career, and maybe shakes the girlfriend a little bit, and we move on from there. But I just, again, it just goes to show the due diligence that UConn staff and really staffs around the country have to do when we're talking about bringing a kid in that you're recruiting, not only just him, but the whole family. And if a kid does not talk to his parents, that's a tough one. Got to be a real ridiculous or a really tough circumstance, like, you know, to not talk to your parents in your early 20s. And that's got to be a big red flag. So, but he's gone to a perfect place in Utah if he's being groomed to be a Mormon. So good for him. Good luck to that. We'll have some shows next week to talk to some folks in Indiana about Tristan Newton, the Blazers, and Donovan Clingan, working on some folks at the Spurs, talk about our boy Stephon Castle. And of course, we'll see if we can dig up some Memphis folks to talk about Cam Spencer and what the Grizzlies loved about him. Maybe it's because the dude is like a grizzly bear, but he'll kill you. So super excited for our UConn guys that got drafted. Best of luck to DC, Steph, Tristan, and Cam. And just wanted to let you guys know, again, support the pod. Every cent of this podcast, not every cent, 10% of every cent that is made is going to go back to Bleeding Blue for good. Want to say this has been another episode of Locked On UConn. I'm your host, Mark Zanetto, telling you to stay locked in, stay connected, make sure your toughness meter is always rising. And as always, go Huskies.